Every unforgettable journey begins with a simple choice. You can follow the same streets that millions of travelers have already explored, or you can take a turn that almost no one notices. It is often that single decision that transforms an ordinary trip into an unforgettable adventure. While crowds gather around the world's most famous landmarks, another version of the city quietly exists just beyond the next corner, hidden in plain sight. These forgotten streets, secret courtyards, and quiet passageways have witnessed centuries of history, yet they remain invisible to most visitors. Today, you're about to discover why the greatest treasures of any destination are rarely found on the pages of a guidebook, and why the most remarkable story of your next journey may begin where everyone else decides to stop looking. The greatest travel experiences rarely begin in the places marked with bright stars on a guidebook. They begin the moment curiosity wins over routine, when a traveler chooses the narrow lane instead of the crowded avenue. Every famous city has another face hidden behind its postcard landmarks, one that quietly waits beyond the reach of tour groups and souvenir shops. Somewhere behind an ordinary corner, an entirely different world is often waiting to be discovered. Most visitors unknowingly follow the exact same path every day. They move from monument to monument, stand in the same lines, take the same photographs, and leave believing they have seen the city in full. Yet only a few streets away, silence replaces the crowds. Old stone passages, tiny family-owned workshops, weathered doorways, and forgotten staircases preserve stories that have survived generations without ever becoming tourist attractions. These overlooked places often reveal more about a city's true character than its most famous landmarks ever could. What makes these hidden streets so fascinating is not simply that they are difficult to find. Their real magic lies in the feeling that they have escaped time itself. While modern life rushes forward only blocks away, these quiet corners continue to follow their own rhythm, inviting those willing to slow down and notice the details. And one particular hidden passage, which we'll uncover later, has remained almost unchanged for centuries, despite standing in the heart of one of the world's busiest cities. Walk into one of these forgotten alleys, and the atmosphere changes almost instantly. The sounds of traffic begin to fade, replaced by footsteps echoing across uneven stones laid hundreds of years ago. The buildings seem to lean closer together, their aging walls carrying subtle clues from different eras. Small carvings, faded signs, and centuries-old brickwork quietly remind visitors that history is not confined to museums. In many cities, it is still alive beneath every step. Some of these passageways once served merchants transporting valuable goods before sunrise. Others became gathering places for artists, craftsmen, or entire communities whose traditions shaped the neighborhoods around them. Over time, larger streets absorbed the attention of travelers, leaving these smaller routes almost forgotten. Ironically, that neglect became their greatest protection, preserving details that would likely have disappeared had they become major attractions. The deeper you look, the more these hidden streets begin to tell stories that no guidebook can fully capture. Every worn doorstep, every weathered balcony, and every unexpected archway hints at lives lived long before today's visitors arrived. But among these quiet corners are places even locals hesitate to reveal, and some of their most remarkable secrets are hidden behind doors that appear completely ordinary from the outside. There is something almost unbelievable about discovering a peaceful courtyard hidden behind an ordinary wooden door. From the outside, the building appears no different from dozens of others lining the street. Yet a single entrance can lead into a quiet garden filled with climbing vines, centuries-old fountains, and stone benches where time seems to move at an entirely different pace. These secret spaces remind us that cities often hide their greatest treasures in plain sight. Many of these hidden courtyards were originally designed as private retreats for families, merchants, monasteries, or noble residences. Over generations, they became surrounded by expanding neighborhoods until their existence faded from public memory. Today, some remain accessible only through narrow passageways that most visitors walk past without a second glance. Those fortunate enough to find them experience a rare kind of silence that feels almost impossible within some of the world's busiest destinations. The beauty of these places goes beyond architecture or landscaping. They offer a glimpse into everyday life that famous attractions cannot provide. Conversations drift softly through open windows. Flowers bloom against weathered stone walls, and small details reveal traditions that have endured for centuries. Every hidden courtyard feels like a carefully preserved secret, quietly reminding visitors that the heart of a city often beats far away from its busiest squares. Ask someone who has lived in the same neighborhood for decades where they would spend a quiet afternoon, and the answer will rarely include the city's most famous attraction. Instead, they might point toward a tiny cafe tucked inside a forgotten alley, a family-run bakery that has never advertised, or a viewpoint reached only after climbing an unmarked staircase. These recommendations are passed from one generation to the next, creating a map that exists almost entirely through local memory. The difference between tourists and locals often has little to do with distance and everything to do with perspective. While visitors search for landmarks, residents notice routines, traditions, and places that have quietly become part of daily life. A small bookstore hidden beneath an old apartment building, an artisan workshop producing handcrafted goods for decades, or a modest square where musicians gather every evening can reveal far more about the city's identity than its busiest monuments ever could. Perhaps the greatest lesson these local secrets teach is that meaningful travel is not measured by the number of famous places visited, but by the unexpected moments that cannot be planned. The conversations with strangers, the quiet discoveries around forgotten corners, and the feeling of stumbling upon something genuinely authentic become the memories that last the longest. Once you begin looking beyond the obvious, you realize that every city contains a hidden world that only reveals itself to those willing to slow down and pay attention. The most unforgettable cities are rarely remembered because of a single famous monument. They stay with us because of the quiet moments that happened in places we never expected to find. A forgotten alley where flowers spill from ancient balconies, the sound of laughter echoing through a hidden courtyard, or a conversation with a local shop owner can leave a deeper impression than standing before any world-famous landmark. These experiences remind us that a city's true identity is not built only by its grand attractions, but by the countless ordinary places where everyday life continues to unfold. Hidden streets teach us to travel differently. Instead of rushing from one landmark to the next, they encourage us to slow our pace, notice the details, and embrace the possibility of getting lost. Every unexpected turn becomes an invitation to discover something unique, a weathered doorway that has witnessed centuries of history, a tiny cafe serving recipes passed down through generations, or a quiet square where locals gather without realizing they are preserving traditions that visitors rarely see. The deeper we explore, the more we understand that the greatest discoveries often happen when there is no plan at all. Perhaps that is the greatest secret every remarkable city quietly keeps. Its soul cannot be found on a map purchased with a ticket or captured in a perfectly framed photograph. It reveals itself only to those willing to step beyond the familiar, follow their curiosity, and wander without knowing exactly what awaits around the next corner. The hidden streets and secret corners that most tourists never discover are not simply places. They are reminders that the richest journeys begin the moment we choose exploration over expectation. Every hidden doorway, every silent courtyard, and every forgotten alley carries stories that have survived generations, waiting patiently for someone willing to notice them. Think about the places you remember most from your own travels. Chances are they were not the busiest attractions or the locations that appeared on every postcard. More often than not, they were unexpected moments. A quiet conversation with a stranger, the smell of fresh bread drifting from a neighborhood bakery, the sound of church bells echoing through an empty street, or the sight of sunlight reaching an ancient stone passage that almost no one else seemed to notice. These memories stay with us because they feel personal. They cannot be duplicated by following a schedule or checking destinations off a list. That is why experienced travelers often say that getting lost is one of the best parts of exploring a new city. Of course, they do not mean losing your sense of direction completely, but allowing yourself enough freedom to step away from the obvious path. Some of the world's most fascinating discoveries happen during those unplanned moments when curiosity leads instead of convenience. A single unexplored street can reveal architecture that has survived centuries, hidden gardens blooming behind ordinary walls, or family-owned shops where traditions continue exactly as they have for generations. So, the next time you arrive in a famous destination, resist the urge to see only what everyone else has already seen. Visit the landmarks, appreciate their history, but leave room for the unexpected. Turn down the quiet street that seems to lead nowhere. Walk through the narrow passage that most visitors ignore. Pause in the small square where locals gather instead of rushing toward the next attraction. Because somewhere beyond the crowds, another version of the city is waiting, one that cannot be found on a map, sold in a souvenir shop, or captured in a travel brochure. It is a version built from hidden streets, secret corners, and timeless stories that reward only those who choose curiosity over routine. And once you experience that side of a city, you may never travel the same way again.